Hi. Call the meeting back to order. And I know we'll all be disappointed, but we'll give CAO Taylor's voice a rest for the afternoon. And we'll hear the dulcet tones of Director Shanks from Community Services, who will give us his overview of his department and budget.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was actually going to suggest that since the CAO had done such a good job, he could just continue on. But so for community services, we do have, some of us are in attendance today. Obviously, I'm here. We've got Leanne Donnelly and Steve Babcock virtually online. Leanne is the executive assistant for community services, and Steve Babcock's the manager of customer services. We also have Alex Welch and Jocelyn Gill here from Building and Property. Alex is the operations supervisor, and Jocelyn is the capital supervisor, and they've been rotating for the last 8 months, filling the role of the manager position, which is currently being recruited. And Jen Johnson, our manager of Parks and Recreation, is not able to join us today. She's vacationing, so good for her. So if you can move on to the next page, please. So that is the org chart. I've just sort of introduced it. So the overall department being community services, the administrative end, which is Leanne and myself looking after things as well. The courier for the city reports in that area. We've got 3 divisions: building and property, customer services, and parks and recreation. As well, we act as a direct liaison with the library group within the city of Kawartha Lakes. They're an independent group that has a board of management, and Jamie Anderson is the CEO of the City of Kawartha Lakes Library, and he will be presenting his budget during the external presentations, which I believe is January 26th, if I remember correctly. Next slide, please. So departmental overview. So we are responsible to lead, plan, operate, and manage and administer the various divisions that we've got, and all of the portions and portfolios within those divisions. And again, we act as a direct liaison with the library board. Our predominant emphasis is on customer service and asset management. We have a number of assets throughout the city, whether it be facilities or parks, and then all of our divisions within really are external facing and providing services to our public and to the customer directly. Within that, we then also are responsible for the human resource management, the financial responsibility, and communications and effective strategic priorities within it. So a big part of it is really maintaining those assets from a standpoint of allowing us to continue to provide the public service that we provide in the different divisions that we have within community services. We have over 250 staff in total. That equates to about 120 full-time equivalents, of which 67 are permanent. We have about 80,000 hours of part-time and seasonal, and then just over 20,000 of student hours. So again, the full-time equivalents within community services is roughly 120. Our gross expenditures are approximately 15 million, with revenues of 5 million for a net of about 10 million, and we manage capital projects annually, about 50 of them. Some of them can be very large capital projects, such as in 2011, the construction of the Fenelon Falls Community Centre. More recently, the renovation and expansion of the Bobcaygeon Service Centre to include the Bobcaygeon Library branch, to small capital projects such as replacing park furniture on an annual basis. Next slide, please. So in 2022, some of our highlights and accomplishments that we had up there, so you can see them. The project at this facility was very extensive, and we're happy that it is pretty much wrapping up now. A few minor components that are sort of behind closed doors that you can't see. Bobcaygeon Beach Park is wrapping up right now. Keep in mind with that, the in-water work is a separate portion of that, and we need to get the permits from the various external agencies to allow us to proceed with that. So whether that's the docks or the boat launch, things of that scenario will be following through with the Bobcaygeon Beach Park project. The Bobcaygeon Library Service Center has opened now and is complete. Centralizing customer service is a major component of 2022, and we'll be continuing to move that through 2023. A big part of that is a result of the pandemic. One of the major capital projects last year was the ice pads at the Lindsay Recreation Complex. So because they were being put in, the summer ice was located in different facilities for 2022, and in 2023 it'll be located back into Lindsay. Working on trail connections and completing the Trails Master Plan, which pretty much is complete now, just finishing off on the final reports. And Council will be seeing the final report for endorsement of the Trails Master Plan in either early Q2 or late Q1 of 2023. And the completion of the Woodville Community Center lobby project was a very positive project within Woodville itself. And a huge thanks to the partners, community partners within Woodville, because they were a huge part of that, both from a standpoint of planning as well as with fundraising for that project. I would be remiss not to say that even though COVID is wrapping up, and certainly it was still in existence in 2022, but 2022, 2021, and 2020, a big portion of what community services was trying to manage was the pandemic, from a standpoint of what facilities were open, what facilities were closed, what services we could offer, what services we couldn't. There was a stretch of time for about 2 months that the rules were changing on a daily basis. And we really, a full compliment to all of the staff within community services, not just the people that are online and in attendance today, but all the frontline staff as well. They really had to juggle to be able to provide the services that we could and how we provided them. And that will be a big part of moving forward too, because what we've learned through the pandemic is that there are some improvements that we can make and have made and will continue to make for how we provide our services and how the public and our ratepayers wish to have those services provided. Next slide, please. So some of the highlights that and objectives that we're looking at right now. So Steve Babcock in our customer services division is reviewing and updating the customer service standards. And you heard our CEO talk about our Empower program. So that's following through that. As part of that as well, you heard about community hubs and the move of the Lindsay Service Center from 180 Kent Street up here to City Hall and a one-shop stop model. So that is falling out of that as well. The Empower program itself and participation in that, we will continue to strive to ensure that all staff, as well as our public, through various formats, are allowed to contribute to that, to make sure that the services we're providing are still wanted and desired in the method that we wish to do it. The Old Gale Museum and Courtyard Beautification Project. So you will recall the large wall that was just to the west of us between the jail and this facility is now removed. There's a fence up there. We have seeded it and it looks much better than it has in the past, but there is a full plan to do a complete remodeling of not just that yard, but also parts of City Hall and the green space here for beautification initiatives, for special events initiatives, but also to provide some better parking within this city block. We will continue to focus on replacement and upgrade of boat launches throughout the municipality. A number of years ago, Council determined that that was a major focus that we should put our minds to. We have roughly 50 boat launches, active boat launches within the city of Kawartha Lakes. So on an annual basis, we go out and do work to ensure that they are maintained, but also enhanced and upgraded from a standpoint of what the launches are. One of the major projects we'll be doing next year is the demolition of the Ops Community Center. We'll be completing the Centennial Park Master Plan. A huge component that I know Councillor Yeo and others are aware of is the Kikobakonk Wellness Center. So we will continue to work with the community groups up there, led by the Chamber of Commerce, and finding the proper partnership for how that will work so we can develop that site and location to benefit the northern sections of our city. and working with our EMS team on the design of a new EMS headquarters. We're in some talks with some external partners as well about where that could be located so that we can hopefully move forward with the actual development of a new EMS headquarters at some point. So I know Building and Property and Jocelyn behind me are working on that one. We also have a Parks and Recreation strategic plan that, if adopted by Council in the budget, we'll be moving forward with, and that will be a huge part of what we require as Bill 23 rolls out and allows us to how we look at and can access DC funds moving forward. A few other things, there's a number of health and safety items. As we roll out of the pandemic and how we provide our services, obviously that's a change. So we need to focus on how we can make sure that we're doing that in a healthy and safe way, both for the public and for our staff. From an administrative standpoint, the city is rolling out with a number of internal items, whether it's the use of SharePoint or ScanMan, different processes that will allow us to be more efficient in how we do some of our administration work. But it will take a lot of behind the scenes work from some of our administrative staff to be able to do that. Next slide, please. So some of the budget pressures, again, you've probably heard already from our CAO in the different areas, and I'm sure some of the other directors that speak later today or at the next session will echo some of these thoughts. Certainly we see continued delays from permitting authorities that allow us to impact the completion of projects. So Bobcaygeon Beach Park, for those of you that are aware, that was the project timelines were significantly extended due to the need to get permits from some of the external agencies and the length of time that it takes to get them. We are still seeing an impact on some revenues as we come out of the pandemic. Not all services that we provide are back up to 100% capacity or 100% use. We are slowly coming back, and we think we will get there. But certainly for 2023, we will continue to see some lessening impact on the revenues. And as the CAO talked about, certainly there's a significant inflation that's going on right now as a result of the pandemic, and it really does impact supply materials and contracted services. Some of the other items, so it's been talked about, our staffing levels are still not up to 100% capacity. We are, as I've said, we're currently recruiting for the manager of Building and Property. We are currently short 2 supervisors within Parks and Recreation. And then there's a number of the frontline unionized staff to provide some of the services that we do provide in the various divisions as well. And then when you take into account the shortage that we've had on students in the summertime, again, as a direct result of COVID, we're still not back to 100%, so it does impact on our ability to provide the services to the public that we wish to do. Bill 23, I talked about that and how the DCs will impact us on our ability to get some funding for some of our parks projects or facility projects that we're overseeing. And probably the biggest one, and this has nothing to do with the pandemic, it's just got to do with the age of our infrastructure. But we have very high level of aging infrastructure. The majority of our facilities, with the exception of those that we've replaced, such as the Fenelon Falls Community Center, but we've got most of our arenas were built in the 70s, Bobcaygeon back in the 50s. Most of our standalone community centers were in fact constructed in the early 1900s and are now, I would suggest that our average age of our standalone community center is over 100 years old. So we have significantly aging infrastructure with a relatively small tax base. So therefore, it was mentioned earlier about the deferred capital lists. I believe Carolyn Daines mentioned it. You will see a big list within the deferred area of community services specific projects, because what we try to do is truly take a close look at the amount of dollars that are available to community services, and then we try to prioritize to make sure that the projects that we are requesting are reasonable from a standpoint of actually being able to complete those projects, but reasonable from a standpoint of the funds that are available to us. So you will consistently see a fairly large list of deferred projects within that list that are community services related, and we're trying to juggle to make sure that we don't lose sight of them, but we can put them in a priority standpoint so that those projects that are required are the ones we're asking for funds for in that given year. And with, I think that's the end of it, so I'll see if there's any questions.
Thank you, Director. Councillor Warren.
Yeah, through you, thanks a lot, Craig. I really like the one-stop shop model. And there are certain services that are there now. I'm wondering if they can be expanded. I know many years ago, we talked about a really truly one-stop service center that back in the day, they actually had building in I'm thinking of the Bob Cajun one specifically, and bylaw. Is that a possibility? Now that things can be done online, maybe people in the service centers could be trained to help people with building and bylaw also. Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Council, I can't speak to the other departments and the services that they would be looking to offer in other locations, but what I can certainly advise is that whether it's the Empower Group or SMT as a whole, that is a big part of what we are doing, and talking with staff, doing customer service surveys as to how people wish to have their services provided. So whether it's in a specific location, whether it's doing things in a different method, so allowing things to be done more virtually, where the accessibility is right there for them so they don't even need to visit somewhere. At least giving those options are being reviewed. So the quick answer to you is yes, there's an opportunity for that, and it's being reviewed. To what level and for what particular service, that's what would need to be truly discussed and then reviewed.
Thank you. Councillor Smeaton.
I'm fine, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Perry.
Thank you, Mayor, and thanks for the detailed presentation. Just a quick question to pick up on Councillor Warren's point. One stop is very convenient, but I know in some contexts there's an implication potentially that one stop means one single source of service for the entire Kawartha Lakes. That isn't the vision at this point in time, I'm assuming, but want to clarify.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to all of Council, that's certainly not the vision at this time. We continue to have 4 locations of service centers. Yes, there's been the move of Lindsay from 180 to City Hall. There's not a talk right now to look at the other service centers and limiting that. I would suggest to you that potentially over time, and as more technology is maybe available to us, whether it's a one-stop shop or not, I'm not sure, but there's more of an opportunity for people to receive services at other locations through perhaps an electronic kiosk at the Lindsay Recreation Complex, or at a library perhaps, where if somebody's going in and they don't even need to talk to somebody, maybe they don't have their IT technology at home to do it, but they might be able to go into a location and pay their taxes without coming to a service center or City Hall specifically. But we are a few years down from that, but it is something the Empower Group and Steve Babcock is looking at.
Great, thanks for the clarification.
Thank you. Councillor Joyce.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you. Great presentation. The aging infrastructure really caught my attention. I have read our strategic plan, but I just can't recall. But do we have a plan in place to address the aging infrastructure on a long-term basis? I assume we do, just if you can speak to that.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the Councillor. So there's probably a whole bunch of parcels to that answer. So there, through the Asset Management Group, there is a facility register that's done up that talks about sort of where each of those assets stand. It was very high level, but we can use, and it's itself, that those plans are getting old, but every facility that we have sort of gives a general overview, 50-page overview of where that is and some of the capital requirements of what are required for that facility. And then our own individual divisions, so whether it's building and property and parks and recreation, which are really the 2 groups within community services that manage and look after the majority of our capital projects. They have an ongoing inventory of their projects or of their facilities and assets, and they also keep a list of what's required there. So, for example, for arenas, we work closely with Simcoe Lewis as our the ice plant refrigeration company. So we have a full list of the inventory of those as well as a life cycle. So we use those life cycles. So we could tell you right now that 5 years from now, we know which chillers would need to be replaced, which dehumidifiers need to be replaced. So that is in place already. It can be better, and we will continue to strive for that. What that takes out of the account, though, is that a piece of equipment equipment that might have a 15-year life cycle, but for whatever reason, after 12 years, it gives up and we need to replace. So we will always have some emergency requests or some changes to the asset management plan based on actual day of work or status of that piece of equipment.
Thank you, and this would include bigger items like we need a new roof, or there's, yeah, okay, thank you.
Councillor Ashmore.
Thank you. Through you to Director Shanks. As far as the boat launches, we have 50 boat launches, and I believe they're categorized into 3 different types of boat launches. Even Class 3 boat launches are well used, especially in the last few years. Are we going to be putting more energies or more staff time or more resources into these boat launches because they're, it's the people's only access, public access to the lakes, and it's really important to them. And the popularity is really high, boat launches, so they're really important. What's our plan for those boat launches, especially the so-called Class 3 boat launches, which are just as important as the Class 1s for a lot of people?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor. So all of our boat launches, correct, they're classified in the A, B, and C. And they're really, the A, B, C classification is depending on the amenities that are provided at those locations. So whether there's actual parking there, if there's a docking facility beside it, if there is garbage locations there. So A is those ones that have the most amenities. Whereas C is truly a road allowance leading to water where there's a boat launch there. And there's really not an opportunity for parking to create more parking. The answer though to your question of maintenance, they all get annual operating maintenance. And again, Ryan Smith in our Parks and Recreation Division has a full inventory and list on what's required at each facility. So we've got a plan over the next 5 years for which of the locations are due for capital upgrades, whether it's an A or a C. It would just mean that obviously more dollars and more work would be required at a boat launch that's an A, whereas a C might just require some additional surface material or a grading. But it's already in the list and our staff review it annually and make sure that the work is provided.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just one question, Craig. You alluded to staffing shortages and certainly the inability to get students last year, which I think impacted on your ability to, for instance, cut grass in parks and other places and caused you to extend the period between. Can we look forward to a more normal season this year? Were you able to recruit summer students, and are you hopeful that you'll be able to recover the part-time and get back to more normal? I'm sure you're looking at what the interval is between cutting and trimming and things like that, but just wondering where we stand.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you to all of council. So really in 2020, I think the CAO mentioned it, there was a decision on that time that the hiring of summer students would not exist due to the pandemic at that time. So that's really what caused us to change the service levels, as you're just mentioning. And now one property, which had typically been cut on a 7 to 10 day cycle, was pushed back to a 10 to 14 day cycle, which was a level 2. A level 2 was pushed to a level 3. Some level 3s were pushed to a level 4. We just didn't have the staff to maintain, and because of some of the logistics and rules that were in place around park use at that time, we could limit it because we couldn't have full access to all of our parks at that time. 2021, we were allowed to do more, and we did hire students to the best degree, but we were, I would suggest, probably 40 people short. So that's why that limited service continued in 2021. In 2022, we got very close to what the required numbers were, and that's thanks to People Services and Leanna Patterson and her team. They've really looked at it hard to figure out where some of the holes were, where we could potentially recruit more, opening up some of the recruitment tools that we had so that we weren't just saying no. to a staff member to a potential staff member that was there for us because maybe they were a high school student as compared to a college student. So I'm not going to suggest we'll be 100% back in 2023, but looking at the growth from 2020 to 2021 to 2022, I'm very hopeful that we'll be very close to 100% capacity in our student levels, which will hopefully allow us to get back to what the service level is required to be. What I will say, though, is that level of service might change based on what we've learned through the pandemic from the various facilities that we have that are out there.
Thank you. Councillor McDonald.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. Just to comment on yours. So if, for example, we aren't going to have enough people to give the level of service to all the parks and everything we do, is there opportunities to use different staff and different organizations or to outsource it? Because the level of parks and so on should be very important to the community. So if we know that we can't do the work, then is it possible that we can outsource that work?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the council. So we've always actually, to a degree, done that. So we have about 185 properties across the city of Kawartha Lakes that Community Services maintains, of which about 135 of them are actually designated as parks. We have about a 65% 35 split on those properties that are maintained by a contractor versus by staff ourselves. So we take a close look at that from a cost efficiency standpoint. So we're not sending a crew in a truck with a machine, a number of people, for a 45-minute drive to a section of the city where there's one park and nowhere else. So we will contract that out. So that has happened and will continue to happen. During the pandemic, what we had to do was we used staff across the city to be able to reallocate those staff resources. So a number of people in community services and a number of people in different departments where the public service wasn't being offered because of the rules of the pandemic and of COVID, we transferred them over. Just top of my head, I don't want to put Director Robinson on the spot, and I'm not, but we allowed some of our staff to go work at a landfill where he was short. So the opportunity is there already, and again, Leanna Patterson and her team in People Services do that. Another item where we address the pandemic is because of the rules that were in place on washrooms and the level of maintenance and sanitary maintenance that was required in those, whether it was a permanent washroom in a facility or a permanent washroom in a park or even a porta potty, which we have about 50 across the city in the summertime. We actually hired an external contractor to be able to provide those services to make sure we were staying up with what the health unit and the province wanted from a sanitary maintenance standpoint on those facilities, because we didn't have the staff to do it. So again, short answer is yes, I think that opportunity is there, both with existing reallocations of staff when required, but also to contract out services if required.
Thank you. No more questions. Could I have mover and seconder? Councillor Warren, Councillor Yeo, all in favor? Thank you, that's passed. Thank you, Craig. Thank you to all your people for showing up. And so we'll move on to item 6.5, which is Public Works. Director Brian Robinson will lead us through his budget overview.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to council, I'm going to walk you through today through the overview for the Public Works Department. So first slide here is just our very high level org chart for Public Works. You'll see we have a tax base and a user rate group. Within that portfolio, we have managers and support for pretty well all of those areas. They are all represented here today, so I want to just take a quick opportunity to introduce. Some of them are online, I believe, and others are here in the audience. So the roads operations, we have 3 roads managers. We have Chris Porter, David Lemke, and Oliver Vigalius. 2 of them are here. David, I believe, was caught up into some other activities and couldn't attend. Transit operations and fleet services are combined into one area, oversaw by Rod Porter. Rod Porter is also here today. Waste management operations is oversaw by David Kerr. Not sure if David's online up there. And then wastewater operations is overseen by Amber Hayter, who's also online there. The last group that we have, probably most important, to keep everybody in line, at least anyways, is our administrative group, oversaw by our EA to the Director of Public Works, and that's Shelley Harrington, who's here in the audience as well. So without that group, we would struggle to deliver what we can on a regular basis, and I truly appreciate everything they do. Moving forward, our department overview. So Public Works, we provide administrative and operational oversight for the implementation, obviously, of roads, solid waste, water, wastewater, fleet, and transit for the municipality. We have a significant focus on service delivery, program delivery, achieving levels of service as defined within legislation and also within as directed by this council. We're continually looking for and driving for improvement within our operations on a daily basis. Doesn't matter whether it's new technologies, electronic technologies, or just general delivery of service. We're continually looking for improvements. Focusing on responsible government, a huge focus on fiscal accountability within our department, making sure we're delivering the best possible services for the best possible dollar, and also focusing on that strategic implementation across the board as directed. We are approaching 200 full-time equivalent, and that's looking at all the part-time seasonal students and really just equating that to an annual hourly quantity. So the actual number of employees within our group is far over 200. We have about a $58 million operating budget expense. That's tax base and user rate combined. So it's a fairly large portfolio managed within our group. And we administrate multi-million-dollar contracts. So if you start to look at and focus on the Miller Waste contract, the Aqua contract related to operations of our facilities, there's a number of large programs that are delivered through our group. So moving forward, if we look at the 2022 highlights and overviews, we have a transition to SharePoint. So this is something that's, I guess, was delayed and pushed through a number of occasions through COVID. Our department had a couple of departments initiated that year prior, but this year was a large focus on transition. It was a significant investment in time and effort for the group to actually prepare for and transition into SharePoint. So that was a successful transition, although still challenging for the group to move forward and continue to use that tool. Roads initiatives, so again, sign inventory that was started through our group. Recruitment modifications, so that is looking at a completely different process and a strategy for recruitment of our staff. As been mentioned in prior presentations, recruitment has been an ongoing challenge across the board, and specifically within Public Works and roads operations, water, wastewater, fleet, and even in transit has been a bit of a challenge. So lots of different focuses on that, working with our people services partners to try to make sure that we can recruit resources. Boreholes and culvert replacement, again, within roads. There's been a lot of other programs that have happened through roads, looking at Oakwood separator, sign, again, we mentioned the sign inventory, EDRMS, the pilot ORV for the off-road vehicle pilot that's ongoing and supporting those initiatives and so on and so forth as well. So there's been a lot of successes through 2022 within roads. If we look at waste diversion and the quantities there, we have some significant numbers that have occurred through 2022, diverting over 6,600 mattresses, which saves the equivalent of about 5,000 cubic meters of landfill space, 12,000 tons of construction demolition diversion. Those programs will continue to be monitored, expanded, and rolled out wherever possible, again, with fiscal responsibility in mind. 71.5 tons of bulky plastic diversion, 500 cubic meters of landfill from textile diversion program that will continue to expand, 10,000 kilograms of batteries. Those are kind of the numbers that we're seeing within waste from a diversion perspective, and continue to expect to see those numbers grow as we move forward. Procurement enhancement in fleet, so you'll aware through that early start report the council previously received that there has been challenges within fleet getting equipment and the timelines of delivery that used to be in that 4 to 6 month range that are now in the 18 to 24 month range. So continuing to look at that. Also looking at how we're procuring a lot of the materials and assets, so looking at DEF fluid and like other types of disposables for those groups, making sure we have contracts in place, making sure we're procuring those in the best possible manner. So the manager's been working closely with our procurement division to try to make those improvements within that department, within that division. Within transit, fourth route for expansion, this is something that's been on the books for a couple years now. Again, looking at those timing and growth of the ridership to warrant that fourth route expansion. We are looking to define that date and move it forward in February. You'll see some information rolling through our staff announcing that fourth route and expansion. The primary challenges to implementation really have been, again, recruitment and staffing pieces, as well as ensuring we have the proper amount of equipment in order to deliver that service efficiently without having to call it back after it starts. So again, you'll see some more information coming forward on that through 2023. And then the last one is the QMS audit. QMS is, again, related to water wastewater division. Council saw that report earlier, or I guess last year, with respect to the QMS audit. And again, there's been a lot of positive work within that group, reacting to respond to those traditional operation challenges and working with our partners. So that's the 2022 highlights. If we look at 2023 highlights and objectives within our budget, again, focusing on staffing, and re-enhancing and moving forward with the training that's really been somewhat suspended over the past couple of years due to COVID. Looking again, continuing to improve on recruitment methods and processes and internal progression. You'll start to see us working with and building new resources that come into, I'll go with, for instance, in roads, where we hire a laborer, progressing that person and giving them the opportunity to train into an equipment operator, into a heavy equipment operator, into a crew lead, and then progression through and building some internal stability within that process. Access to supply chain impacts procurement. Again, you'll see the cost of equipment, the cost of just general procurement for those activities, you know, parts, labor, all those things are growing. They're definitely not slowing at this time. So those impacts you'll see within our operational budget, ensuring that we are maintaining the same level of service, and you know, those costs coincide with that that activity. Preparing to implement ditching program. So you'll see within the roads group, when we get into the details of the org chart and the staffing requests, is looking at creating 2 new ditching crews, and council's already approved the equipment for those on the early start project. But that's again looking at catching up and properly maintaining our ditching and drainage infrastructure within roads. Primarily looking to support the capital program when they're doing road resurfacing, making sure that the infrastructure is there to coincide with that capital program. Lots of opportunity, and I think it's going to be a fantastic program when we roll that forward. Producer responsibility for waste diversion targets. So that IWMS, apologies for the acronym, is the Integrated Waste Management Strategy. It's a document that's council approved and adopted, looking at diversion targets and so on and so forth. There's lots of discuss with council in the coming year over producer responsibility and specifically diversion targets. Council could opt to, you know, achieve and target to meet provincial mandates. It's going to come at a significant cost, and you know, I think there has to be some balance in there. So we definitely bringing some information forward to council through 2023 to ensure that we are achieving what council wants to achieve. There's lots of middle ground in there, so to speak. We're continuing right now to work with the producer responsibility for the transition of recycling, and that's again making that responsible to the producers and pulling those costs away from the municipality. But how does that work? The limitations within commercial that are not part of that program right now that we're collecting. So there's lots of, again, decisions to bring forward and have a discussion with council. So you'll see more about that in the coming months. The last one, winter budget adjustments and reserve stability. So this is a big one from my perspective. We have traditionally targeted, and I'm not going to get into the very nitty-gritty of budgeting, but for we typically target 50 events and look at the average cost of event and build our budget based on that with anticipation of cost increases for materials and labor and so on. That has continued to build. If we have a very, very light winter, which we've seen in the past couple of winters, there's money left there in operation budget. So where we're working with finance and the CEO to refine how we're budgeting winter to build a reserve, so that instead of budgeting, that 75th percentile, we can budget to the 50th percentile. And then if we have a heavy year, we can dive to that reserve as opposed to impacting general operations. So we're revamping how we view and how we target that operating budget, and that will be reflected in the coming years as well. It's initially started in 2023 to build a reserve, and we'll see some adjustments to budget and process through 2024. So budget to actual pressures, again, I mentioned contractual costs. Contractual costs will always be there. Contractors are seeing the same pressures that we are for labor and equipment, fuel, excuse me. So you're going to continue to see those pressures within our budget. OREG 406, Ontario Regulation 406, is the soil management legislation that talks about how we handle, manage, and dispose of soil. Public Works generates a lot of soil, excess soil, through ditching programs and other operational work, as well does our engineering counterparts, and even some of the builds that have happened through human services, as well as Parks and Recreation. So that's definitely going to be a pressure moving forward. Facility maintenance. So we have, excuse me, a depot master plan that identifies how we're going to progress into the future, as well as as far as central facilities go. But we're going to need to continue to maintain the facilities we're in until that program can catch up. Source separated organics is something that's going to be discussed with council, already has been at a high level, but again, looking to get some direction on that. Fluctuating commodity prices for our existing recyclables has been a challenge to continue to budget. I've already mentioned the transit route expansion and the costs associated with it. Supply chain deliverables and fleet capital costs. I've gone through a bit about that. Council's already aware through the early start program. And then within water, wastewater, the primary impacts currently are some of the chemical contracts that are seeing some increases there as well. And that is it for now. If there's any questions, happy to take them.
Thank you. Councillor Smeaton.
Real quick, through you, Mr. Mayor. First, I have to say this has to be one of the most, I can only imagine, trickiest budgets to try and pull off with all the changes in weather and all the things that are happening in the world. This is really impressive because you're dealing with a lot of serious change, unprecedented change. It's pretty cool stuff. Two very quick questions. One, at the Conservation Authority recently, some municipalities, certainly not a suggestion, I actually don't know, I'm just curious, are attempting, especially in rural areas, some sort of a brine solution as opposed to the salts that are being used on the roads, that sort of thing. And one of the questions asked was, do you need a different type of vehicle, obviously, if you're doing that? So it doesn't matter whether we're there or not or whatever. I guess I'm just curious, again, a budget question. Is some of the fleet allocations that we'll be looking at, is there anything in there that's about different trucks? Are we using something that, or are we all salt in this municipality? I actually just don't know.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor, within City Court, the Lakes, we are currently two types of material. We're either salt or a sand mixture.
So our trucks are, the fleet recommendations are for what we have.
Absolutely. It's for continuing service. We have piloted a brine application in the past. You're right. It's completely different equipment to apply.
And that's the only reason I didn't mean to put anybody on the spot as far as their opinions of it. It was more just the budget piece of it.
Absolutely. It's something that can be looked at again in the future, but it's not currently within our current plan or work plan or budget proposal for the future.
Okay, perfect. And the only other question I have is with the 7 full-time new positions in roads, are they mostly due to predicted development coming and all that will be needed in those departments, or?
Again, through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor, the incremental positions requested in roads are primarily for that ditching program.
Okay, I thought so.
So there's 6 positions related to that, and then there's 1 position that's related to the growing and expanding citywide program, and general oversight of that in combination with our streetlights and our locates and all those programs that are continuing to grow and have pressure on them.
Thank you. Councillor Warren.
Thank you, through you. Thanks for coming out today, and I have just a question about, can we share staff with Aqua? I know we have a contract with Aqua, but if we had a short, didn't have enough staff, could we reach out to Aqua to help with that in water and wastewater?
Again, through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor, we have a contract in place that's very structured as to what services they're expected to deliver and what we deliver in-house. We currently have sufficient resources in-house. There's currently a couple vacancies that we're actively recruiting for. We just had a new person start last week. So, ultimately we have a mandate and a requirement to deliver the operational program. If we get to a point where we are challenged, we'll obviously look at all options on the table to support that group. I'm a firm believer of the model that we have in place right now of having a hybrid model to ensure that we have our services being delivered, the contractual service being delivered, and that relationship and partnership that's there right now. So,
when we're going into producer responsibility, will the municipality have any oversight into residential recycling at all? Like right now, I think it's 50% or something, and we have input into that. Would we have input into that once it's totally taken over by the producer?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the council, councillor, the way that it's structured right now is the province will be mandating that the producers provide that service. What will be recycled, how it will be recycled is really up to the producers at that point because it's their responsibility. I think what's going to be nice about it provincially is there's going to be a consistent approach across the province. Right now, township to township, again, excuse me, there is a difference in what's being recycled, how it's being recycled, and so on. So there will be some consistency across the province. Someone moves here from Waterloo, it's going to be the exact same program. But the what, how, and where will be dictated by the producers. We won't have a direct input on that. What we will have input on are all the activities that are outside of the requirements of the producer's responsibility in that legislation. So, whatever's not being recycled by that group or the commercials and so on. Okay.
Thank you. Councillor Joyce.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you. Under the org chart on the landfill attendant for full-time, we have 7,853 hours. Are those part-time seasonal workers working those hours? Or is that full-time people working overtime?
No, through you, Mr. Mayor, those are the part-time hours and or seasonal hours that support the operations. As you know, we have certain areas that are closed down through the winter, so those are seasonal hours as well as the part-time supporting. So that's part of the full-time equivalent. Take those hours, divide it by the 2080, and you'll get an FTE.
Oh, so those 7,000, that represents the 4 full-time?
So, apologies. So, I think I may have just confused it instead of just saying yes. The 199 FTE that I had at the beginning of the presentation, the total overall staff, if you take those hours divided by 2080, that gives me an FTE equivalent, a full-time equivalent.
Yes.
But those staff are the part-time staff working those hours.
Right. Okay, thank you. Just wanted clarification. That makes sense.
Councillor Perry.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for the presentation. a lot of work goes into these every time. I'm just looking at the slide that's on the screen right now, of course. Transit route expansion caught my eye. Is that dedicated solely to Lindsay and area, or does that involve expansion into rural communities?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor, right now that is expansion within Lindsay as mandated by the Transit Master Plan. It's a fourth route looking to pull in some services to the north area of the community that's currently outside of the service area. There is within the master plan a mandate to start to look at, again, and explore rural transit and options associated with that. So look forward to having more conversations with council on that in the future.
Great, thank you.
Councillor Ashmore.
Thank you. Through you to the Director Robinson. My question's on transit as well. Just looking at the trends here, I know it's a difficult one to generate income, or to generate a net income in transit. Looking from this here, your projections of that will be around 1.2 million losing. But if once we get this new fourth run, I think to Springdale Gardens, would that help with revenue to maybe turn that deficit around in the future?
Sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor, to councillor. A lot of factors involved with that. I'll go back to the ridership numbers is the biggest factor on that. If you go back pre-COVID, we saw a 5 to 10% kind of growth on a regular basis moving forward. COVID actually took a big dent and reversed that program. We're slowly seeing the numbers start to come back and continuing to grow. When we add the fourth route in, obviously there's a significant operational expense to add that route. If the ridership is there to offset that, absolutely. If not, then we'll be continuing to look at ways to subsidize and continue to operate that program.
I think I'm correct in saying I don't know of any transit in any community that makes money. They all cost. They don't make money. I had one question. With supply chain issues, are we looking at increasing our inventories, say in parts for the fleet, or stockpiling calcium chloride or salt or things like that in order to offset rising prices and in order to ensure that we have material on hand?
Again, through, I guess, to you, Mr. Mayor, and in response to that, through to council, we have lots of plans in place. So if you look at specifically for winter maintenance, we have contracts in place, we have agreements in place for both supply and the delivery of. So those are relatively secure as far as quantities. When you start to look at individual parts, yes, they are getting fewer and far between. The manager of the fleet division is actively looking at ways to ensure that we have that available. We're able to do what we need to for the time being. There is a significant cost impact to holding and maintaining additional inventory, especially if we may not need a particular transmission or alternator or whatever for several years. But that's part of the program within that group and across the board within all divisions, I think, of the city, is to look at how that procurement and supply chain is impacting the divisions and make sure they react accordingly.
Thank you. Seeing no further questions, can I have a motion to receive the presentation? Councillor Joyce, Councillor Perry, all in favor? And that's passed. Thank you, and thank all your folks for coming today. Appreciate it. Just before we go to the next presentation, I wanted to tell council that we will be lowering the city's flags to half-mast in recognition of the passing of former Lieutenant Governor David Onley. David Onley was a friend to the City of Kawartha Lakes. He came up here on at least one occasion, and maybe more than that, to work with our accessibility group. And Certainly, he was somebody that the province of Ontario will sorely miss because he was a presence and an advocate for those with disabilities. Mr. Rojas, you're going to be on. Director Rojas will present from his chair as he has some aches and pains, yes. Glad to see you here, Juan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just some minor mobility issues, nothing major, but just being cautious. I do have my staff joining via Zoom, or the management staff and engineering. Okay, so the presentation. Oh, thank you. So the Engineering and Corporate Assets Department of City of Kawartha Lakes consists of, 7 divisions, being administrative, corporate assets, development engineering, infrastructure design and construction, technical services, crossing guards, and the Kawartha Lakes Municipal Airport. I'll go through them one by one and then introduce the respective leaders for each division. So the administration division, led by the engineering EA, which is Lisa Pineman. Lisa is a black belt, referencing back Ron Taylor's presentation on initiatives management. So we're very fortunate in engineering. As you'll see, we have a lot of high performers and people accredited through the Lean Six Sigma program that was done a few years, or 5 or 6 years back now. Lisa is a certified black belt with the city, and she's been with the corporation for 18 years. Lisa leads the administrative department, which is responsible for overall management and budgeting of all divisions within engineering, leads the crossing guard program, manages the municipal airport in coordination with Lumix, reports on financial management, long-range needs and feasibility planning, and ensures department goals align with the corporate strategy. Next is corporate assets, which is Adam Found, that you've heard a lot of in the last month or so. Adam is a green belt, and he's been with the corporation for 9 years, not including his student hours. So he was a student with us through his academic career in university. So Adam, as part of the corporate assets division, develops capital budgets and various capital planning studies, maintains the asset registry, and completes major capital grants application, among other things. Again, he's instrumental in the DC background study, which I'll touch on later, and coordinates the asset registry with the various departments. Christina Sisson, again, is another black belt with the corporation. She's has 15 years of experience. She leads the engineering development engineering section. So she manages, reviews, coordinates, and implements the design and implementation of responsible development with infrastructure that conforms to the city standards and does not negatively impact surrounding properties. Christina just recently took a report, her annual report to PAC, or the Planning Advisory Committee, in December, which highlights the status of the majority of our development activities, including site plans, subdivisions, and where they are in the process. It's a very, very good report that she does annually. We've assumed quite a lot of subdivisions this year, but it also gives you a sense on the development activity, where it is in the development process, and how quickly the housing stock is being replenished. Oh, sorry. There we go. So Corby Purdy is the leader in our infrastructure design and construction. Corby is a green belt with the city. He's been with the city for 18 years. Corby was also a student prior to his full-time role with the city. So we have a lot of students that worked up to managers within the engineering department, which is a good progression planning for the city. So Corby manages, coordinates, designs, constructs, and administers engineering construction services for capital projects. So he's involved with full road reconstruction, bridge reconstruction, designs, public meetings, EAs, that nature. Mike Farquhar leads our technical services division. Mike is also a green belt, also been with the municipality for 18 years, and he was also a student prior to joining us full-time. Mike, in his division, he prepares the 5-year capital budget and implements programs for roads, traffic signals, streetlights, drainage, and sidewalks. Mike gets a lot of activity in our roads, both our roads needs study and our life cycle extension program, which are very popular with past council, and I would imagine will be popular with this council as well. The Crossing Guard program, again led by Lisa Pineman. The mandate of this program is to ensure elementary school students cross streets safely as they walk to and from school. So it's all our crosswalks, crossing guards are part-time, but there are lots of them. And Lisa manages them, coordinates them, schedules them, hires them, etc. And lastly, the municipal airport, again, overseen by myself and Lisa. This is contracted out by Lumix. Lumix is on year 4 of a 5-year contract, so next year will be their last year under this current contract, and then we'll get a new management contract out for the next term. The municipal airport also has an advisory board that sort of guides and informs the decision of the airport. They're an advisory board, not a management board, but their input and expertise are extremely valuable to the City of Kawartha Lakes Municipal Airport. So the city's airport is an important asset that offers significant economic and community benefits. The airport is the only facility between Minden and Peterborough available for Orange medical evacuations and used frequently for life-saving missions. So some of the 2022 highlights and accomplishments. So Lindsay and Fenland Falls downtown reconstructions were substantially completed. Omimi, I still want to recognize Omimi. We did start late in 2022, and that will carry over to 2023 for top asphalt. But Omimi was also one of our downtowns that we've done. For the last several years now, we've been focusing on downtown enhancements, beautification, economic development, all those things. Endorsement of a 5-year roads plan. This goes in with our 5-year roads need study. So we assess all our roads every 5 years. We take that inventory and the need and then develop a 5-year roads plan, which is a guide. It's a framework that informs yearly budgets. And based on our 5 years needs and 5 years roads plan, then we propose any given year road budget or road resurfacing, road reconstruction budget for council's endorsement. Assumption of legacy subdivisions. Again, I go back to the PAC meeting of December that details all the subdivisions. But in 2022 and 2021, we've had a lot of assumptions of subdivisions that were, I'm going to say, 20 plus years old that we got off the books, we got occupied, and we fully assumed them. So that was a huge accomplishment. There's still a few to go, and hopefully we'll get those assumed in 2023. And again, updated the subdivision agreement template for 2023 use. This is something we do yearly, where we look at our templates, our agreements, and our procedures, And if there's a betterment or efficiencies that are required, we incorporate them into the subdivision, bring them to PAC for discussion, ultimately get them approved by council, and then they form the basis for any new subdivision agreements or any type of agreements going forward. A couple other ones that are not up here, there was a lot of traffic, I'm going to say traffic-related warrants or studies. The big one was the conversion from the 50 kilometers per hour to the 40 kilometer per hour school zone. That the majority of it was completed in 2023, with some carryover in 2022, with some carryover in 2023. And as evidenced by the last committee of the whole, there's always traffic warrants, whether they be stop signs, stop controls, speed reductions, crosswalk implementations that we always get, and there's a significant amount that were done in 2022. Some highlights and objectives for 2023. So we expect to complete the expansion of the Lindsay Water Pollution Control Plant this year. That is a $19 million project. It's quite large. We started that in late 2021 as a multi-year project, so it was always 2.5 to 3 years in duration. We are on schedule and within budget, and we're scheduled to be completed in 2023, which is a great program. It's in line with our growth management plan. It accommodates growth, a lot of benefits to it. Completion of the asset management plan and development of the development charge background study over 2023 and 2024. You've heard from Adam Found the new changes to Bill 23 that will this directly affect in the DC collection. So we're hoping to update that bylaw and finalize that charge in 2023. Again, schedule assumptions of several subdivisions, both legacy and more current. We did notice during COVID an increase in applications, I'm going to call them. Both subdivision applications for housing stock. You just drive around Lindsay, you see the activity of construction, both on the private side and on the capital side. The pandemic made construction work essential. So construction work was critical to the economic recovery efforts during the pandemic, and it kept us very busy in engineering. So we're progressing on that front, especially in the northwest of Lindsay, but also in other areas of Kawartha Lakes, where we've seen increased activity in the building, as well as third-party utilities. Which is under Mike Farquhart's group. So third-party utilities are gas, hydro, most recently fiber or internet, which there's been an uptake in to provide high-speed internet to our rural communities or to the home that we've seen a massive increase in. Prior to the pandemic, we were processing about 100 to 120 applications per year. Over 2021 and 22 respectively, they're in the neighborhood of 400 per year. Couple reasons for that. There was some provincial grants that private companies took advantage of to accelerate their internet coverage. That's probably the most important reason why we saw the uptick in applications, but we expect that to continue in 2023 also. And lastly, completion of the Transportation Master Plan and Servicing Master Plan. So the Servicing Master Plan is underway. We've hired a consultant and they're going through the models, updating the system. The Transportation Master Plan, we have an RFP ready to go out. We're hoping in the next month or less that will be released through our purchasing department. And both these master plans are key to align with the growth management plan that you heard of during the development services presentation. The growth management plan sort of sets the framework for how the city's going to grow, where it's going to grow, and how it's going to be intensified. The master transportation and servicing plan, two individual plans, then looks at the infrastructure to accommodate that growth. both how to move traffic and how to provide sewer and water for those intensifications or growth or expansionary developments. So some 2023 pressures. The airport, again, the airport, it's a small airport, but we essentially break even. We have to pay ourselves some taxes, but if you ignore the taxes that we pay ourselves, we're profitable. Not by a lot, but about, between 20 to 30,000 profitable, which is excellent for any municipal airport, in particular for a smaller scale. The airport's major source of revenue is fuel sales. So we buy and sell jet fuel or airport fuel. So that fluctuates. So that's a pressure that is hard to predict. So depending on the demand of the fuel, it'll have an impact on both our expenses and revenues for the airport. The crossing guard program, expenses have been increased annually due to vacancies. The crossing guards, for the majority of them, have a before school and after school. I think it's 30 minutes or 45 minutes before school and then half an hour after school. So it's not a lot of hours per week. They're not volunteer, but they're paid. But they do give their time and efforts back to the community. It's a paid position, but really more community involvement. Which we find we're struggling with people wanting to do those sorts of positions. So it does fluctuate. We have noticed over the last couple of years vacancies in our crossing guards. But Lisa, I think, has it under control now, and she always had. But we're just finding challenging ways to mitigate those. And increased development activities. Which results in increase of DAP fees. So DAP fees are an acronym for Development Application Approval Processing Fee. So with every subdivision or site plan, we get a percentage of DAP fees. And that DAP fee is used, it's paid upfront, so it's front loaded. So we get the final payment of the DAP fee at the time of agreement execution. But then we use that money throughout the life of the project. And most subdivisions take anywhere between 5 to 10 years to assume. So we get paid up front, but then we use that money for, let's say, 7 years. So that is always fluctuating. If development activity is good, then we get more DAP fees. If it slows down, we get less DAP fees. And we use the DAP fees to offset staffing costs related to development and only to development. Sorry, and that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Director. Any questions for Director Rojas? Councillor Ashmore.
Through you to Director Rojas. Is there any update on the Omemee wastewater treatment upgrades? If it's going to be a long-term project, like 2 to 3, 4 years?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. So the Omemee water pollution control plant, which is a combination of subsurface treatment and spray irrigation, the EA was completed late last year and filed. We have confirmation from the ministry that it's satisfactory, and we're moving on to the design construction stage. So we do have a proposal from Gear Galloway that we're bringing forward to award the next phase, which is detailed design, and then go right into construction. Both the detailed design and construction are fully funded. So they were previously funded in a past budget. So you will not see a funding ask in the 2023 budget line because they were previously committed. But we anticipate that the detailed design will be for sure done in 2023, and I'm hoping that construction will be middle to late 2023 start.
Councillor Joyce.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you. Again, just a quick question under the full-time and additional hours on the chart. Again, those are part-time seasonal workers, just to clarify?
Yes, the additional hours, so if you turn on page 105 of your budget book, you see a table with additional hours. If you scroll down to page 106, at the top of the page, you'll see the crossing guards, and you'll see the 5432 hours, which correlates to the additional hours.
Crossing guards, okay, thank you.
No problem.
The reason I'm asking those questions, you add up the hours that, in this particular case, I didn't know there were crossing guards there. My question would then be, if that's the number of hours every year, why don't we just hire 2 full-time people instead of paying overtime hours or whatever? So that's why I wanted clarification. Thank you.
Yes, I don't know through you, Mr. Mayor, so we have a lot of locations, and they all have to work at the same time. So that's why we can't hire 2 people. I believe we have, I'm going to get this wrong, 17, but Lisa Pineman is more intimate with the Crossing Guard program. I may ask her to weigh in on the logistics of it.
No, I understand that. Yeah, no. it's
Okay,
fine.
fair enough, thank you.
Thank you. Just one question from me, Director. You alluded to traffic and traffic management, and transportation plan. With the increase in development, particularly in Lindsay, when do we anticipate that we're going to start looking or seeing changes to the traffic patterns or changes to streets that are suddenly going to be heavily used?
So the 2010 Transportation Master Plan did a screen analysis of exactly that. They looked at our arterial roads, our major collectors, and a screen analysis is basically linear line work showing where the traffic demand are most needed. You know, there was a little bit of a 2028 to 2011 slowdown in growth in Kawartha Lakes. But now we're ramping up again. So we are looking at, the 2023 Transportation Master Plan will revisit those and look at widening or new connections. One, for example, is the Colburn Street Bridge. That was awarded last year. We've kicked off the design and we hope to implement that, I believe, in 2025. Budget, subject to council approval. So those connections are going to be critical. Same with the Logie Street connection. So there's a Logie Street that connects Lindsay Street to Colburn Street, which is another sort of route through Lindsay. But not only Lindsay, we are looking at all communities for traffic impact.
Yeah, I was thinking particularly of Lindsay. If you look at the construction at the corner of Coburn and 35 as an example, and what that's going to do to traffic over there. And then I think up on Angeline Street, significant increase in population in that area.
Yeah, so through the Northwest settlement area, or secondary plan, there are additional connections to Highway 35, MTO Highway 35, number one. So there is two east-west streets internal to the Craft Tribute subdivision that will have intersection controls onto Highway 35. We did widen and improve Colburn Street in front of City Hall in 2021. And in your budget, for 2023, you'll see just under $1 million, I think it's $950,000 or thereabouts, for utility relocations on Colburn Street. And that's between Highway 35 and Charles Street. The plan is to relocate the utilities, so everything's aerial, so the hydro poles, the gas is on the ground, but to relocate the utilities to their ultimate location, so that in 2024, we can then 4-lane Colburn Street, 4-lane plus a turn lane, so 5 lanes Colburn Street in 2025. The design for the widening, sorry, the design and the EA for the widening of Coleman Street is 100% complete. So the next progression is to relocate utilities, get the utilities out of the way, and then widen the road. We also took a look at Angeline Street, both north and south of Coleman Street. So there is currently an EA for Angeline Street between Kent Street and Coleman Street that will be finalized this year. And then Angeline Street, as it goes around the bend to Thunder Bridge Road, we had that in the plans in the past to urbanize and to reconstruct as well. So I think we have the perimeter roads covered. We have the MTO roads covered with junctions, and also Highway 35 between Coleman Street and Thunder Bridge Road is planned to be a 4-lane cross-section. That's coming. And we have the internal connections within the development. So it's just a matter of implementing all those capital projects.
Thank you, Director. Councillor Warren?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, just to let Juan know that Bob Cajun is getting really busy too, and we do need traffic lights. Thank you.
Had to get that in, eh? Yeah, okay.
For my ward, yeah. Get ready.
If there are no more questions, can I have a motion to receive the presentation? Councillor Yeo and Deputy Mayor Richardson. All in favor? And that's passed. Thank you. Looking for a confirming bylaw. Councillor Perry, seconder. Councillor Yeo. All in favor? Thank you. And a motion to adjourn. Councillor Yeo, Councillor Warren. All in favor? And that's passed. Thank you all for coming today. Thank you to all the staff who participated and came today. Appreciate it.